Welcome to Bible Believers Fellowship and our study in Daniel chapter 3 verses 1 through 13. In this study we lay the groundwork for understanding what went on with the three Hebrews before they are thrown into a fiery furnace and how this pictures the coming Great Tribulation period. There are few who teach Daniel chapter 3 in the manner you are about to hear, so we are confident most listeners will be enlightened and challenged as we now join our study of Daniel chapter 3 verses 1 through 13 in progress.
The chapter is about Nebuchadnezzar erecting an image and the three Hebrews being told to bow. Well, we're going to actually spend this week laying the foundation. A lot of missed information, a lot of missed revelation. And what we're going to see, and I want to give you the overview, and then we'll dig in and see it clearly, is that Daniel chapter 3 is a picture or a type of the Great Tribulation. Now, what's about to happen is, the next moment on the prophetic calendar is, although there's different things that can happen to help set the stage even further, the big great event that's to happen is the rapture. And God's going to remove the church. And then there'll be this time somewhat after that when the Antichrist will sign a 7-year covenant with Israel and the United Nations. And that'll begin a period of time known as the tribulation period. That's also known as the time of Jacob's trouble. And then the last 3.5 years are known as the Great Tribulation, a time like the world has never seen before. Now, in chapter 3, you'll see that Nebuchadnezzar represents the Antichrist. Then you'll see that this image in this chapter represents the abomination of desolation and the image that will be erected and brought to life. And you'll be demanded, if you're still here, to worship the image. So I suggest you get saved now, go in the rapture, and you don't have anything to worry about. Amen. Now the fiery furnace represents that great tribulation period of persecution by the Antichrist of God's people. And then those three Hebrews, of course, represent Israel, who will be persecuted by the Antichrist. Now you'll notice as we read Daniel chapter 3 that Daniel is not there. Daniel represents us, the church, who has been removed. We will be absent from that time of great tribulation. And so without further ado, we'll jump right in. Daniel chapter 3 and verse 1, we see that the image that Nebuchadnezzar dreamed of, it seems clear that that's what he erects and turns it into an idol. And we'll see more evidence of that as we read. But in verse 1, I want you to read that with me. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. So, you remember the image from chapter 2, the head was of gold and the rest of it was not of gold. Well, it appears that what Nebuchadnezzar did was erect that image, but ignored the fact that the gold was only the head, which represented him, by the way, and he turned the whole thing into gold. And this massive statue was bigger than Touchdown Jesus that burned down a few months ago on I-75.
I heard about that.
Sadly, they're rebuilding that.
Yes, they are.
This one is 90 feet tall by 9 feet deep. And what I mean is it's 9 feet all around, circumference, you know. But of course the scholars try to downplay that and say that, well, it was on a base and it was probably not that tall, but with the base helping it, it was, you know, and it wasn't really gold. It was probably just, gold plated. And there's all these. Nebuchadnezzar had all the gold in the world. If he wanted to make a 90 feet tall, 9 foot deep gold image, he could. Now, they may discover this thing one of these days buried somewhere and it's made of wood or stone and layered in gold. But either way, it was gold, and whoever finds that thing, set for life. So get digging. But, but in his pride and rebellion, he's making Constantine's error. Constantine's error was in 325 AD, he said, we can't beat them, so let's join them. And Constantine brought all the churches into Rome, made it the state religion, and he himself never gave a testimony of believing in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, by the way. Constantine claims to have seen a cross in the sky and said, "In this sign conquer." I'm sorry, but Jesus never preached that. That's a false gospel.
Yes.
Constantine believed he would be saved by being baptized, not by believing the gospel. Right before he died, he asked to be sprinkled. So there's no evidence Constantine was saved. He was sacrificing to idols right up to his death. So you've been told lies in your history books.
Amen.
Yep.
And what Constantine did, since he was of the flesh and not of the spirit, was he decided he'll bring unity in the Roman Empire by bringing everybody together in one religion. So he mixed paganism with Christianity, and that's how you got Roman Catholicism. Now what's interesting is, we just read that the height was 60 cubits and the breadth 6 cubits. And what that turns into is, what's 60 cubits? 60, because 60 means 3 times 20. A score is 20. So it's 60 cubits. And then when you have a breadth, that means the width and the length are of the same. So you have two measurements of equal in the breadth, and that is 2 sixes. And that's why it says the breadth is 6 cubits. So in cubits you have 60 and then 6 by 6 if you measure the idol. Now, guess what? That's Revelation 13:18. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for the number of a man, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Now you can just write that off as coincidence, and the next 2 or 3, but after a while you're going to have to catch on. Read verse 2 with me. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Now basically you're looking at all the big cheeses.
Yeah.
Well, we do respect the fact that God ordained Nebuchadnezzar for a purpose. And I believe God has ordained the Antichrist for a purpose. The world spits in God's face.
Amen.
Well, what we have in Nebuchadnezzar is what's going to come in the Antichrist, payday. Israel had filled their land with sodomites, with idols, with false religion, with lies, with deception, with apostasy in the temple. The Bible had gone on a shelf, like it is in most churches and homes in America.
Amen.
And in Jeremiah 27, we get an explanation. Beginning of verse 5, I have made the earth, the man and the beast that are upon the ground by my great power and by my outstretched arm, and have given it unto whom it seemed meet unto me. In other words, God didn't ask anyone's opinion. And he says in verse 6 of Jeremiah 27, and now have I given all these lands unto the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, my servant. And the beasts of the field have I given him also to serve him. And all nations shall serve him. Does that ring familiar with the book of Revelation? All nations and the Antichrist. And his son and his son's son, until the very time of his land come. And then many nations and great kings shall serve themselves of him. And finally in verse 8, and it shall come to pass that the nation and kingdom which will not serve the same Nebuchadnezzar the king of Babylon, and that will not put their neck under the yoke of the king of Babylon, that nation will I punish, saith the Lord, with the sword and with famine and with the pestilence, until I've consumed them by his hand. See, what I'm pointing out is God has established Nebuchadnezzar for a purpose. And so the Antichrist serves a purpose in the Great Tribulation. And now we see in verse 3 this abomination. Verse 3 in Daniel 3 says, then the princes, the governors and captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, And all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up, and they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. So you have this picture of all the world's leaders coming to Babylon in front of this huge idol. Picture this. Use your imagination for a second. All the most important people in the world of that day have come before this huge image with all this music and dancing and singing. And now, you'd never find modern leaders behaving like this. I mean, we're too advanced. I mean, we're beyond that. It's going to happen in just a couple months, right? In San Francisco, United States of America. It happens every year, and almost all of our presidents hang out there. Amen. And most of our senators and congressmen at some point hang out there. And they have this huge, what Richard Nixon called, now, excuse me, I don't want to offend anybody, but I'm quoting a president here. Called it the most faggoty thing he'd ever seen in his life. It's all men with men. Amen. And then they have at the end a huge worship ceremony with this massive owl that I was told is 90 feet tall. Oh my. And a huge fire where they burn bodies in effigy with this ominous, evil-sounding music. And Alex Jones has videotaped it. And there's been other news reports on it. It happens every year, and our leaders do that. Just like we're reading in Daniel chapter 3. What is it Ecclesiastes says, honey? There's nothing new under the sun. So then verses 4 and 5 says, Then an herald cried aloud, To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. That's going to happen in the Great Tribulation. Amen. And it reminds me, I don't know about you, it reminds me of Jesus prophesying during the tribulation period, the abomination of desolation that'd be set up in the temple. That he got from Daniel. So it's a circular thing. Daniel prophesied it, Jesus quoted it, and now it's typified here in this image in Daniel 3. Matthew 24:15, Jesus said, When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. But I thought I'd show you there is an abomination on the Temple Mount today. And here's an example. That is an abomination on the Temple Mount. Dome of the Rock. Brother Mike, I really want to go in the rapture. I really do. But I'm praying that right before we go, I get to see that thing blown up. Now, just like you're going to see in the Revelation, he's told, worship the image or die. That's your freedom of religion right there. I think that's coming soon to America. Daniel 3:6, read that with me. And whoso falleth not down and worship shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. So there's, just like the Great Tribulation, worship the image or die. Should remind you of Revelation 13:15. And he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Worship or die. That's the fundamentals of the faith during the tribulation period. Now, we see this Antichrist spirit in Islam.
Absolutely. Yes.
And the people who say that Islam is a peaceful religion are liars.
Amen, that's true.
There are Muslims who are peaceful, but they are not following Muhammad or the Quran. Muhammad was a killer. And everything else, all these people out there saying otherwise, they're lying. They're whitewashing it. And that's their attitude. And if, the Bible says there's going to be those who rebel against the Antichrist are beheaded. It's awful coincidental that the largest and fastest growing religion today is a religion that wants to behead you if you won't convert. But you'll find the same thing in Catholicism. Study their history. 1,000 years of the Inquisition, they killed tens of millions of people just because they wouldn't convert. You find it in Hinduism. You don't believe me? Go look it up right now. Where Hindus control a country, they kill and persecute anyone who disagrees with them. You'll find the same thing with Buddhists. Go into the parts of India where Buddhism still has a stronghold. They are killing Christians today. And it won't be on your news because your news is owned by pagans who don't want the truth out.
Amen. That's right.
You find it in animism down in Africa. You'll find it in Judaism. You go to Israel, the Orthodox Jews are persecuting Christians. And especially if you're a Messianic Jew. And you'll find it in New Age multiculturalism, where they all talk about getting along, being one world and all that. Yeah, they love diversity as long as you don't claim that you're right and they're wrong. Once you say that Jesus is the only way, all of a sudden they want to do away with you. And they're praying to their spirit guides to remove us. And when the rapture takes place, there's going to be a few 100 million people who think that we've disappeared because of their answered prayers to their spirit guides. That's what they think the rapture will be. Now, you notice, we respond by simply standing on the truth and preaching the gospel. We're not forming armies. We're not blowing up people. Our response is to pray for them, preach the gospel, and let the Lord work things out. So there's a great delusion, and you're seeing it more and more today, that Bible-believing Christians are being painted up like Muslim fundamentalists. Like we're somehow dangerous. But the fact is, Bible-believing Christians have never massacred and killed in the name of Jesus. Amen. The Catholic Church isn't a Bible-believing Christian organization. And no cult, Jim Jones, David Koresh, whoever it is, none of them were Bible believers. They all believed that they were a special spokesman and they added to the Bible, like the Pope. But you take a group that is Bible believing and Baptistic, even though not all are Baptist. If you go through the history, there's other groups like the Paulicians and Valdois and others who are Baptistic. But they all have that in common. They are Bible believers, and they've never formed armies and killed people or held inquisitions or any of that. Amen. People talk about the Salem witch trials, which was only a handful of people that were killed, by the way, compared to the Inquisition of tens of millions. But even if you look at that, those were people who were not going by the Bible. They were going by the old Roman Catholic idea of having city-states and the church controlling the state, Puritanism. And that's not the same thing as the Bible-believing Christians. We believe in separation of church and state. We don't want the church controlling the state. We don't want the state controlling the church. And when you have Bible believers like that, they never do this, and nowhere on earth can you find that happening today. You go any place where there's a majority of Bible Christians, you will not find them killing people. But that's not how the American media, that I think is full of demoniacs, who are running around telling people lies and trying to picture Bible believers as though we're dangerous. And you see this, what I call ecumenical charismatic unity. And that is what you see going on here in verse 7. Therefore, at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Now what you got going on in churches today is, they whip it up into a frenzy, get the music going, get the loud beat, get everybody singing repetitious lyrics, get the blood pumping, get the emotions going, and then all of a sudden, they'll pretty much do whatever you want them to do. And so then they're flopping around and barking like dogs and doing all kinds of crazy things. And that is also then hand in hand with the whole ecumenical movement that says, let's just all get along, truth out the window, as long as we can hold hands and get along. That's not Bible Christianity. We stand on the gospel. We sing the song, the gospel brings unity. True unity is based in truth. not just holding hands and getting along. And that's a beautiful thing. But the alternative makes God sick. Revelation 3. And this is an example. This church in Australia called Hillsong, and their teachers are teaching nothing, basically, except for feel-goodism and get along with everybody, and that's all, you know. And there we have, we've talked about in this Bible study, Billy Graham for years has watered down the gospel and said that he thinks that people are going to heaven just for being good people, which contradicts what he preaches a lot of times.
Yeah.
But he was on Robert Schuller and Larry King Live denying the gospel. And this is his grandson, it's Franklin's son, Will Graham IV. Sadly, he's in his mid-30s, and he is already denying the reality of hell, which is also what his granddaddy Billy did.
There is a hell.
Hey, listen, I love Billy Graham, I love Will Graham, but I won't put up with that because I'm told not to. Do I hate him? Absolutely not. I praise God for anybody saved under him, but I'm not going to endorse him, and I am told by God to warn you about that.
Right.
So don't get mad at me, because it's true. And right down there you see this little girl flashing the horns of the devil, a satanic sign. And this is going on at Christian gatherings because the kids are so dumbed down with their NIVs and their lack of teaching. Everybody just get along, and all they do is listen to satanic and sex music all day long. And so then they go to a Christian gathering. That poor girl, she don't know any better.
Amen.
It's not her fault. Nobody's teaching her anything. And so there's a spirit of deception sweeping the church. And of course we know the Vatican versions are the underlying foundation of that.
Amen.
False Bible. Jesus said, these words that I speak, they are spirit and they are life. Well, if you've got a false Bible, you've got a false spirit. And then we know that's going to take place during the Great Tribulation period. 2 Thessalonians 2:8, and then shall that wicked, capital W, that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming. Praise the Lord. That's right. The verses 9 and 10 continue, and pay attention to this now. This is how the deception is going to happen. Even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders. This false signs and wonders movement is building the bridge and setting the stage for the Antichrist and the false prophet. And with all deceivableness of unrighteousness, and then the perish. Look at that phrase, deceivableness of unrighteousness. That's when you incorporate sodomites in your pulpits and then put up with sin among the church and don't preach against it. Because they received not the love of the truth that they might be saved. And here's an example of Benny Hinn and the spirit of deception. And this man is a thief and a liar. He steals millions of dollars a year so he can live like the Pope. Money that should be going to the ministry. And this man flushes it. And I mean literally, because he gets meals for about $500 a night and then flushes that money literally. God's money should be reaching lost souls. And Benny is eating it up like a beast. And this is what he calls a ministry. And most of those guys are on his payroll. Putting on the show. 2 Thessalonians 2:11 and 12 then says, and for this cause God shall send them strong delusion that they should believe a lie, that they all might be damned who believed not the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Our message to people is the gospel, but when they reject it, it is this. You have rejected the gospel. If the rapture takes place, you may not get another chance.
Amen.
I believe that if you hear and understand the gospel and reject it, you're damned.
Amen.
And of course, any good study of the Great Tribulation has to include a Jewish conspiracy. But look what happened in Daniel 3:8. Wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews.
Yeah.
Those Jews are always causing the division. Well, guess what Revelation 12 describes in verse 17 in symbolic language, but it's describing an event that happens. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, who is Israel, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, which keep the commandments of God, and that would be the 144,000 in their converts during the tribulation, and have the testimony of Jesus Christ. So what we see today is just the tip of the iceberg. This is the Westboro Baptist Jew-hating apostates running around with "it's not your land" signs, which, by the way, I mean, we've got plenty of evangelicals who agree with that. Here's an example of a man who used to be sound in the faith just about 10, 15 years ago, a guy named Tex Mars. He came out standing for the King James Bible and standing against the apostasy. Next thing you know, he started seeing a Jew behind everything. He sells that Protocols of the Learned Elders of Zion, which is a forgery. It's a true book, but they wrote it making it look like it was the Jews. It's not. It's the Illuminati. So when you read the Protocols and you see the Jews, just replace the word Jews with Illuminati and you get the truth. Well, Tex ain't smart enough to figure that out. Well, these Jew haters show up for Nebuchadnezzar in verses 9 and 10. It says, they spake and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man that shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music shall fall down and worship the golden image. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, that he should be cast in the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Verses 11 and 12. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon. See, the Jews control everything. See, that's what they're saying. They control the media, the government. Just, what does it say in Ecclesiastes? Nothing new under the sun. Thou hast set these Jews over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Psalms describes this, and this is prophetic here. It says they have taken, this Psalm 83, verses 3 and 4. Also make a footnote there of Psalm 2. But in Psalm 83, 3 and 4 it says they have taken crafty counsel. Crafty, that sounds like the Freemasons. They have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thy hidden ones. They have said, come and let us cut them off from being a nation. That's right out of the headlines today. That the name of Israel may be no more in remembrance. Every Muslim country wants that today. And the truth be known, so does the Pope. But we're going to end on a cliffhanger. Verse 13 says, Then Nebuchadnezzar in his rage and fury commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. And that's where we stopped. Just a reminder, even our cliffhanger has a prophetic type to it. Because just as we see everybody shaking and trembling at these Jews who won't bow, Zechariah 12:2 talks about our day today and the Great Tribulation. Behold, I will make Jerusalem a cup of trembling unto all the people round about when they shall be in the siege both against Judah, hey Jude, and against Jerusalem. And so even current events on the news tonight is in a state of a cliffhanger. Just like we're ending tonight in Daniel 3.
Be sure to visit our website at kjvbiblebelievers.com, where you can find a wealth of MP3 audio message downloads, along with additional videos, articles, and links. This message is brought to you by Bible Believers Fellowship, P.O. Box 662, Worthington, Ohio 43085. I am Greg Miller. Thank you for listening.